with all of those chores being said, it was interesting. Growing up in college, my roommate and I had a 1 terabyte NAS. And it was awesome because you could administer it over this thing called a web interface. You could use Netscape, like, wow. And what he didn't know is I already broke into it, reversed the firmware, and made it such that every random copy of a file off the device greater than 20 megs would result in it being replaced with a Broadway show or having very inappropriate items being sent across to him. At which point it took him a few days to realize that it wasn't him, but the storage device. And he said, we need to get a new one. And after 4 warranty repairs, he finally realized it wasn't them, but me. So the interesting part about this talk is you get to learn exactly how to do this with this one specific Lenovo device, but albeit in a different manner. And the nice part is you get to learn some stuff along the way. So take it on, Rick.
Alrighty, thanks, man. So I'm going to be looking down a little bit because the light is super blinding, but I'm paying attention to all of you. Just understand that. Anyways, so my name is Ramgattie. Like John said, it's right there. This is a weird one. And the name of my talk is Intro to Vulnerability Chains. And I'm going to show you how you can get command injection on this device. The reason why I wrote this talk is because I work in the research team at Independent Security Evaluators, who are the people that paid for me to be here. And we do a bunch of cool research. And when I started learning about these things a couple years ago, I always thought that it was very mysterious how you can exploit all these devices. And my coworkers made it sound like it was just very complex things where I needed to write very long buffer overflows and look at all this hex code and all these other things, when in all reality, it's much more simple than that. So first, a little bit about myself. I like web application hacking. It's my thing. I also enjoy reverse engineering mobile applications and cryptography. And I am a security analyst at Independent Security Evaluators. Independent Security Evaluators, for those people, we're based out of Baltimore, Maryland. We have an office in San Diego, California. We do all sorts of web application and other types of assessments. So if you have a thing you need somebody to look at, just let me know and I'm happy to look at it. We do things from the white box perspective, black box, and everything else in between. Here are, like I mentioned, the reasons why I'm presenting. I want also for people to get the feel of understanding that hacking things is not exclusively looking up what the Nessus results are for something and clicking on the buttons so that you can sort them by severity. It's also not about just looking in Metasploit for modules that somebody else already wrote. There is somebody in the background that's actually writing those, and you can be that person too. I enjoy reverse engineering, and there's a lot that goes into looking at these devices. And considering that most of you most likely have a router or a NAS device in your house, you can probably start doing this too if you wanted to. Sweet. So our goal today is going to be that we have a NAS device. Just think about it. If you want to simulate more, just you have a router home, and there's an Ethernet device that allows you to get to the admin page or the administrative page or whatever else you want to call it. We want to see what we can do to compromise this device because of that exposed attack surface. And we want to make it remotely accessible. So what that means is that I want to send it an individual command, or I want to set up something so that whenever a victim visits it, their device will ultimately be compromised and I can get a shell on it. So the outline for the talk is just those 4 things. We're going to talk about what the Lenovo is. We're going to look at the attack surface. We're going to find some vulns, and then we're going to write an exploit. The finding vulns and writing exploit part is going to be a little bit more live. So you guys are going to see how I go through that process and how I build them myself. Full disclosure, I already know what the vulnerabilities are because we responsibly disclosed them. But writing the exploits is going to be a little bit more difficult, and you guys can see how it is that I'm trying to stack these things together. And that's why the talk's called Chaining Vulnerabilities. This is our guest of honor. I thought I'd have something taller so that you guys can see it, but since you don't, there's a picture of it there. And it's a NAS device just like any other. Lenovo made the device, I guess, in 2016. It's also marketed by iOmega, a much cheaper version. Just doesn't say Lenovo on it. It has a whopping 1.3 gigahertz dual-core processor with 512 megabytes of memory and some SATA drive bays and all that as well. The more important part is that it has 2 RJ45s that allows it to just connect straight to your network over Ethernet. These are the details that I want you to keep in mind while we're doing this, and that's that there are internal threats. So internal threats are people that are already on your network They can access a network service that is only accessible over the network. So if you have a router at home, you probably have noticed that there's an option for you to turn on the ability to interact with the device over the WAN. As soon as you enable that, you can go to the device's IP address or the IP address that your ISP has assigned to you, which is probably not the best idea if you're considerate about the security of your network, because then after somebody can access it from the outside. From the inside, though, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be limited exclusively to the people that are on your network. There are attacks, for example, like cross-site request forgery or DNS rebinding, where you can use somebody already on the network to issue requests on their behalf, which is what we're going to be doing today. And authentication, I wanted to just remind you very quickly that some vulnerabilities are unauthenticated, so that means that the person does not need to be logged in and you don't need to know their credentials. But at the same time, if a vulnerability is authenticated, it doesn't mean that you can only issue the X or carry out the attack if you know the person's credentials. If you have attacks that leverage a functionality in, for example, the browser to issue requests, then that's still going to work. We're looking for a remote shell, and we're going to combine mostly those two vulnerabilities, command injection and cross-site scripting. But I will show you why cross-site request forgery is very important for this to work as well. The command injection is going to be in the functionality that handles how you can connect to other cloud storage devices, which is kind of funny. And the cross-site scripting is in the security page for the device, which is way more funny than that. So let's go ahead and look at that now. So here is the admin page. I think most of you saw me logging into it while we were getting ready to get things started. Since that part wasn't recorded, we'll do it again. The username is admin, and the password is just a password that I know. So have in mind that in this case, we're looking at it from my perspective. We want to see what it is that we have access to. When you're reverse engineering these devices, you will eventually, if you buy one or whatever, you do know the username and password. Your goal is to develop an exploit that you can compromise any device without knowing these things. So here's a functionality, just a normal NAS device. You can explore content. And there's one called backtick reboot, which I will not click on for reasons, because it's going to reboot the device and we don't want that right now. And then there's also stuff you can just crawl through it and figure out where everything else is. An important detail is that when you create shares and you have names, like for example, this one's called backtick reboot, as soon as you create that share, there is a shell script that's run that eventually does allow you to execute commands. Let's go ahead and create one right now, just so that you can see what that would look like. And we're just going to use a backtick, and we're going to open up a netcat port on, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this one's very much just that. So as soon as we click that, it's going to issue a post request that we're going to look at together. Oh yeah, this is great that this screen's huge. The share name on the bottom there, you can see that it's just has everything URL encoded that we just sent. It's double URL encoded, so we're going to take that and drop it in Burp Suite's automatic decoder. Decode it once as URL, decode it twice as URL, and here you can see that it's just exactly what we typed in. It's a backtick and just open up a netcat listener. The interesting thing about the share functionality is that if you try to rename something, it also does that. So if we do 12 is going to be too low, so let's do 8 and 3/9. Click apply, and let's SSH onto the device. So when I was looking for vulnerabilities on this device, there were two main things that I was trying to do. One of them was I was trying to create files and see where they are, and the other one was I was just trying to see after SSHing onto the device if anything was running by just checking PS. So let's go ahead and do that. I already SSHed onto this, so there should be one in here somewhere. You're going to SSH onto it, or not. And it's going to be admin at 10.42.0.196, if I remember correctly. And this one is that password, or not. So while I remember the password right now, we can see that if it's not admin, it's going to be root. And it's going to be a password that the manufacturer allows you to set. Okay, that part doesn't matter. We'll get a shell on it because I don't know the admin password, and that's going to be way better anyways. Anyway, so that's creating shares. So that's part one of finding command injection, and there's another one. So let's see if we can do this. We're going to set up a netcat listener, and I'm going to show you how I was able to find the other one. Netcat listener is on port 1234, and we're going to find the other command injection right now. So they have this thing that I mentioned before that allows you to create a personal or add a personal storage device, which is here. It's the personal cloud. And this one is also just as easy as the last one. Just type in a personal cloud name, which is going to be test. Username is going to be test. Password is going to be, actually password is the one that matters. And this time we're going to intercept it so that we can see what it looks like. Once we issue this request, oops, we want to do it from over here because this is one that's being proxied. Once we do it from over here, we'll see that it's going to allow us to issue requests, and we'll see the curl request. Perhaps it's intercepting right now, so that's not going to go through. There we go. Scroll down, create a new personal storage device with intercept on. And this time the command injection is actually in the password. So I'm just going to have just some random data in there for now, which is my name. And now we're going to substitute that out for backtick. Curl 10.42.0.1, because I'm sharing my connection, and that means I'm the gateway. And that should work. So let's see if our netcat listener went off. No. So lucky for us, I suspected something was going to go wrong, and I put it in repeater. And here we can see that we have the other one. I'm just going to send this to another repeater tab, and we'll see in decoder that this is going to be what our final payload looks like. Dakota's URL, and Dakota's URL again. And it's designed to open up a reverse shell, or open up a bind shell that's listening on port 9000. So with this one, we're not going to instead use curl. So since I just became authenticated again, we're going to have to do two things. There are two authentication tokens here. There is the iOmega cookie, and there's also this one up here. So CSRF allows us to automatically send a request on the user's behalf when they use session tokens as a form of authentication. But it doesn't when we don't know the URL parameter. So this URL parameter right now that I have highlighted isn't going to allow us to issue this request. Just for kicks, we can try to issue it now. It's going to say invalid, authentication failure. So we already know that we can pull these out because we have access to these from another request. So just scrolling through these, we'll see that, let's find another post request that happened recently. There we go. Pull this value out, put it in repeater. And now I'm just going to issue this request in the browser in the current session, and that should give us a shell. And then after, we're going to have to work our way backwards and try to figure out, well, what is it that we need? Nope, no closing. Okay. So let's open back Firefox. Since I close that, we'll go back to the device, which is at 10.42.0.196. We'll log in. Log in again. We'll go to the administrator panel we want to issue another request that gives us the token that we want, the C token, in a parameter. So let's go through these. Here's one right here. Copy it out. Put it in the request. We saw repeater. And request in the browser's current session. And if everything's good, we'll have a shell. So let's connect to the device. It's going to be 192 or 10.42.0.196. The port should be 9000. Type in ID. That was way more stressful than it had to be, but there we go. We can prove that we're root. Whew. Getting hot. Anyways, so now we gotta figure out, let's look at that request again. Can you guys see that? Okay, that was a yes. Good enough for me. So, like I mentioned, these two tokens right now are the problematic ones. The cookie we can get through CSRF. So we're good on that. Notice that there's no other things inside that post body that we would need to know as an attacker. Because we can set those things to whatever data we want to, and it's going to work. I have 10 minutes left, all right. So what we need to do is try to figure out how to get that C token. Let's get that from the browser. Lucky for us, we can look at the browser's, we can look at the browser's storage and figure out where it is that stuff's being stored. So click on storage. Let's try to find out. So session storage doesn't have anything. What about local storage? Local storage doesn't have anything. And these are all for burp.com, that's why. So let's look again through here. Web developer, web console. We're going to look at the storage part. So just now we saw the Omega cookie. And then in local storage, we see that there's another one. So there's that number, the 101 here. That's very small, hard to see. And then there should be this 107. So let's look at that request again and see what number it was. It was 101. So that one's stored in the browser's local storage. So I actually wrote a JavaScript file or a JavaScript thing before this, which is called Lenovo ix4-300d, which is just a JavaScript file, sf.js. And here I use JavaScript to pull out the Omega user cookie from local storage. And then after I issue the request with that value that we pulled out. So as you can see on this line that's highlighted right now, I use JavaScript's string format syntax to pull the value that we took out of the Omega user cookie and put that into the URL that we're going to issue the request with. So let's go ahead and escape from this now. All right, I was able to exit Vim. And cool, so here is the other part that's funny, which I really hope I can do in the next 10 minutes, and I'm sure that I can, because I believe in myself. And so in the security.html page, they have a cross-site scripting vulnerability, and it's reflected cross-site scripting. So if we do this on the fly now, I hope that it works. And so that's going to be image source A, arrow equals, let's do, there we go, cross-site scripting. So the other good part about this now is that we can use this cross-site scripting vulnerability to load another file. So how about we serve this with Python's simple HTTP server. And this is going to be the name of the file, so let's copy that. Let's try to copy that. We'll run it over here. Do some fancy script tag stuff, or not so fancy script tag stuff because it's pretty basic. Sorry, Lenovo. And we're going to do it, we need to get it from somewhere, right? So we're going to do HTTP : // We are the gateway here, so it's going to be 01. Port is going to be 8000. I'm going to get it from /Lenovo, whatever. I have 800. Heavens to Betsy. And that should be, let's script source HTTP, and that should be the whole thing. That should have worked. Let's see if it took it. Oh, don't kill it. So it did get it. So let's open up another tab and let's see if our exploit worked. 10.42.0.196. Port's going to be 9000. ID. That's a fully remote exploit. It works. We're root. Whew. Alrighty, so that's actually the whole thing. And Lenovo is a pretty big company. They have pretty good security, and well, okay, one of those is true, but we found out that it was actually not that bad, right? So when you start thinking about it, that most of these devices are pretty vulnerable, and it's probably not like it's 2019. You probably hear everyone talking about how funny it is that IoT devices or anything else that's electronic and connected to the internet is pretty much a pushover. Well, although it may be funny, it's kind of also scary because most of these devices you really don't you can say that, well, the solution is for me not to buy them. But there's also the problem that you don't actually have that option all the time. I don't know about you, but sometimes I go to buy something and the only option is the internet connected option. And as time goes by, that's kind of becoming the norm where people think that it's perfectly okay for this thing to be vulnerable because everyone realizes that it's vulnerable. But at the same time, this is the one that's vulnerable is the only option. So, and also a lot of manufacturers don't seem to be providing updates for these devices once they already like somebody finds vulnerabilities. I am happy to say that Lenovo did do a very good job at pushing out a firmware update for this thing after I reported the vulnerabilities, so kudos to them. But we also found out that out of the 13 devices that we audited, some of them cared, not all of them. So if you are wondering about like what I think would be a good idea if you are wondering about how these things can be fixed or what things should be done, here they are. Short term, if you're a manufacturer, you should probably have somebody looking at your stuff if you don't want to. Long term is that if you are going to continue to be a manufacturer, if you don't want somebody to look at your stuff because you think it's too expensive, buy your developers some books or something, or just send them to training. Maybe that'll help. But it's probably better than me putting a command injection payload into one of the fields and getting command injection right off the bat. All right, cool. So I didn't see a number, so I'm good. If you're a consumer, the short term is if you're tech savvy and you want to do these things that I listed here, you can try it out. It is kind of funny that all the time people are like, well, use good passwords and update your firmware. Well, I didn't use anyone's password to run this thing, and I found the vulnerability in the most recent firmware, so I don't think that really helps. It does help a little bit, but it's not going to stop everything, and that kind of leads you into a false sense of security, so careful with it, I guess. You should disable remote access. I mentioned that at the beginning of the talk. I don't think it's always necessary, so if you don't need it, please turn it off. And if there's a bunch of services that you don't need, definitely turn it off. The personal cloud feature you couldn't disable, and you can't disable the security feature either. The one that we got cross-site scripting in. So although it may help, it's not a perfect solution. And long term is that if you do see a manufacturer having a lot of bad devices, you should just ask them to fix it. I've had a lot of luck tweeting at people and saying, I've emailed you 100 times, you're now blocking my IP address, can you try to fix your stuff? And they've actually done it. So although it may be kind of public shaming, it does get the job done. So take it and do whatever you feel is best. That's the end of my talk, folks. I really hope you enjoyed it. That was as real as I could make it. If you guys do have any questions, I'm here. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it.
Any questions for this fun little exploit chain?
I am the fun little exploit chain, by the way.
Well, oh, wait, we have one right over here.
How many companies out of the 13 care? Like what percentage?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I can say that more than 4. That's like, I guess like greater than 5 actually cared. Some of them, one of the things that we learned is that a lot of companies with bug bounty programs do not care. Do not care. It's good that they have them, but someone like just because you have a bug bounty program does not make you better than everybody else. Anyone else?
Yeah. So how did you find out that this page could execute this URL?
So when we got the device, I SSH'd onto it and I pulled off all the binaries and I started looking for things that would allow me to execute code. Yeah, so I looked for, that's typically how I do assessments too. I start by what will give me the ability to execute code and then move down from there.
Thank you, Rick. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thanks.
Great
man.
job.